Welcome back. In part 1, we did a quick flyby of the backlog refinement. In essence, we did a high level overview of this very important event. And I'm excited that you decided to stick around. So, are you ready to do the deep dive? In this episode, we will put backlog refinement under the magnifying glass. Alright, now let's do another pass through this backlog refinement. This time we will take it slowly. We will step into it one step at a time. And as we do that, I will explain more details about each of those steps as to why we do that and what are we looking for from that particular step. So as we know, the backlog refinement starts with the product owner. So in our case, we have a product owner and she is owning the backlog as well. So she owns the product backlog, she's managing that, and this should be a deep product backlog. Now, I'm not talking about the depth of the product backlog or the number of items in the backlog. The deep refers to 4 different aspects of this product backlog. They refer to the 4 dimensions of the product backlog that makes up a good product backlog. So this deep refers to detailed appropriately, estimated, emergent, and prioritized. So as we know, we are deferring details for later by writing the user stories. So in your product backlog, you have a lot of those items that may or may not have the details. And in fact, we are deferring them, right? So a good product backlog is detailed appropriately. The items at the top are very thin slices, whereas the item at the bottom are big chunks. And what I mean by items at the top, I'm referring to the items with the top priority will bubble up to the top of the product backlog. And if it is a prioritized item, it is a high priority item, then we want to have slices which are thinner. Whereas items at the bottom can stay big chunks because we may or may not work on it, right? So the first dimension of a good product backlog is it is detailed appropriately. The second is the estimated. Again, items at the top, which are thin slices, which are the highest priority, which are the items that the team may take it into the next sprint or the sprint after that. So we want these items to be estimated. And in fact, that is one of the reasons why we want to take these items into our backlog refinement. We'll talk about it in a few seconds. So second dimension is that these items are estimated. The third is emergent. Again, we are deferring the details for later, right? So as the items become prioritized, as we take it through the backlog refinement, we will be having these conversations, we will be getting all these details, and these details emerge from this conversation, from this collaboration. So they are emergent. As part of this conversation, the team, the product owner may identify some additional items, additional user stories that will go on to the product backlog. So that is the third item, third dimension being the product backlog being emergent. The last one is the prioritized. The product backlog is prioritized. Again, product backlog is prioritized appropriately. We are not looking for the product owner to prioritize all the 100 or 1,000 items that we have in our product backlog. What we want is the product backlog is prioritized appropriately. Product owner knows the top priorities, maybe top 5, top 10, and she can bring that to the team, right? So these are clearly marked in the product backlog as far as the priorities. So let's assume that our product owner is Miss Fab. Miss Fab for fabulous, right? She is a fabulous, fabulous product owner, and we'll refer to her as Miss Fab. Now back to that prioritization. So our product owner, Miss Fab, has been looking at the product backlog. She's maintaining it and looking at the items, and let's say she has prioritized top 3 items. So we know that what is the priority 1, P1, P2, and P3. These are the 3 priority items that the product owner wants the team to work in the near future. That near future could be next sprint or the sprint after that. So she has the stories written for this P1, P2, P3. She has them as the raw user stories. Again, these are raw stories, so it could be as simple as one line statement as to what functionality she is looking for when the team works on this story. So she has the priorities, she has the raw story. Now she is taking that to the team for that communication, collaboration, so that they can, together with the team and the product owner, they can bring out all the details so that they can get the story to a ready state where the team feels comfortable taking it into a future sprint. Now remember, we have the product owner and the team in the session. There is a raw user story that's in the center of the table, and that is the topic of the conversation. Now, high on the agenda for the team is that they want to clearly understand the story. They want to understand what the story is, what the story is about, what feature functionality the PO is requesting for. So the team wants to understand the story very clearly so that they can build that functionality and deliver it. So to start with, to give this understanding, the PO, Miss Fab, will take that user story and explain that user story. Explain what the functionality she is looking for, what it has to deliver. And as part of that, she should be able to explain the who, the what, and the why. Now, the user story could be written in that format as a user so that I can get some value. Or it could be as simple as who, what, why. Bottom line is that the product owner, Miss Fab, should be able to explain to the team as to who this story is for, who is the customer, who is the consumer, what functionality this story is supposed to deliver, and then why we are working on this story, why we should consider this story. So she should be able to highlight the value this story will deliver to our consumer. So at a minimum, she should be able to explain the who, the what, and the why. And along with that, she will also explain the acceptance criteria as to what are the criteria that this story has to meet in order for Miss Fab to accept it as done. So again, initially, I would say Miss Fab is just taking that raw user story and explaining this, explaining the who, the what, and the why, along with the acceptance criteria. Now there is this back and forth between the product owner and the team. As the product owner is explaining this story, the team may ask some additional questions, and then Miss Fab in turn will answer those questions. So there is this back and forth conversation happening, and through that more and more details are emerging. As part of that, the team may also identify some additional dependencies, and if we identify those dependencies, we want to capture them, recognize them. There are some dependencies that we may have to tackle later on. Dependencies are very, very important because they contribute to the complexity of the story. They will drive as to how much effort is required in order to build and deliver that functionality. So definitely pay attention to the dependencies. Now, in this back and forth, after Miss Fab has explained the who, the what, and the why, the acceptance criteria. Uh, in addition to that, she may want to give some context. The team may ask for the context as well as to when, in what situations this functionality will be used. So, getting that additional context will help the team tremendously in understanding the functionality being asked for. So, there the product owner can explain what we refer to as scenarios. In fact, a good product owner will include this in the user story. She would have written the scenarios along with the who, what, why, and the acceptance criteria. She can write these scenarios, these are the business scenarios, using a language known as GWT. That refers to given, when, then. So essentially, given a precondition, when a certain action is performed, then the product should behave in a certain way. So she would have captured those scenarios as part of the user story. If she has not captured, at least she should be able to walk them through these scenarios while in the backlog refinement session. So remember, this is going back and forth. So the team and the product owner has spent several minutes going back and forth on these user stories. The goal here for the product owner is to give the clarity that the team needs. The goal for the team is to ask all the questions that they have, all the questions that they need answers to get that clarity. So I expect both these parties to come prepared. Come prepared in the sense that the Miss Fab can answer all those questions, and the team is engaged in this conversation and asking all the relevant questions that they need answered so that they have clear understanding of this user story. So through these several back and forth, through this conversation, through this collaboration, now the team has good understanding of the user story. They are clear about that what. So now let's take it into the next step. And that is, now let's focus on the how. Now that the team has clear understanding about the what, the team can start thinking about the how. How would we build this functionality? How would we ensure that we are meeting those acceptance criteria? How do we ensure that this functionality caters to those scenarios that Ms. Fab has described? How do we ensure that these dependencies are taken care of? Right? So the team would go into that additional discussion about the how. They may discuss the technology stack that they have and how they can build this functionality within that technology stack. So here I expect that there may be some technical discussion happening among the team members. So ultimately, we want to get some estimation on this user story. So once we are clear about the what, once the team has discussed the how also, then we ask the team, okay, now give us the estimation. Now remember, this estimation is coming from the team, not any particular individual, but the entire team participates in this estimation. The estimation can be done using the story points, or my preferred method is simple, small, medium, large, the t-shirt size. This estimation, as we know, it's a relative estimation. So all we want to know is it a small effort, medium effort, or a large effort? So let's say we ask the team to give the estimation. They go through the activity known as the planning poker, and we go through a couple of iterations of that planning poker, and the team is not able to settle on a estimate. The team is not able to come to a consensus on whether it's a small story, medium story, or a large story. In that case, what it means is that maybe the team still needs some additional information. Maybe there are some pieces of information missing. In that case, I would say the team should write a spike story. So this is essentially a research story that the team is writing up, recognizing that hey, we are not able to settle on an estimate for this story. So we don't know what we don't know, but we know that we are not able to come to a consensus on the estimation. So instead of going in loops, instead of churning on it while we are in the backlog refinement and wasting everybody's time, we are writing up a spike story, recognizing that we need some additional information. We will go and do some research, get that additional information, and bring the story back to the future refinement session. So write up the user story, and then the team moves on to the next story that's on the priority list of Miss Fab. Let's say the team was able to come to a consensus and the team marked the story as a large effort. Now, if it is a large effort, I would ask the team to stay on this story and move into the next stage, and that being slicing. So we want the team to slice this story, the large story, into multiple smaller chunks. And the reasoning is that if it is a large slice, if it is a large story, the team may not be able to complete that entire story within a sprint. We don't want to carry the stories over across to the sprints. So we want the stories to be small enough so that the team can finish it within a particular sprint. So I'm going to ask the team to stay on this story, look at it again from several other dimensions and slice it into smaller chunks. All right, so we are looking at the size, the complexity of the story, and the team has identified it as a large story, and we are asking them to slice it. So one question is, how do we know whether it's a small or a large effort, right? So again, team is considering all that aspects. Along with that, the team can also use this criteria known as the invest to ensure that the stories are small enough. So this invest criteria is what the team is looking at as they are looking at the slicing. And if the team identifies that, hey, we need to slice this further, the team can also look at another criteria known as the spider. So the spider is going to help them in identifying different ways to slice the story. First, let's look at the invest criteria itself. So invest is referring to the independent. The story should be independent. Stories should be negotiable. Again, negotiable meaning there is a conversation happening between the team and the product owner. The story should bring the value. It should be estimable. So if the team is not able to estimate, one, as we talked about, they can write the story, they can write the spike and punt it for later, or they can stay on it and ask for some additional information, additional detail from the product owner. So story should be estimable. Next criteria is the small or sized appropriately, and that's where we are focused right now. That the story should be sized appropriately, small enough that the team can complete it in a sprint. And the last piece is testable. The story should be testable. How would we test it so that we can prove to the product owner that the story is done? How would we ensure that the testing reflects the acceptance criteria's meeting? Right, so that's the invest criteria. So that can help in slicing along with the spider, and the spider is talking about different ways to look at it, different vantage point from which you want to look at the story to identify where you can slice the story. One we already talked about, S refers to the spike. The second one is the path. Look at different paths. Look at different interfaces that the consumer, the customer can take to get to this functionality. So the paths and the interfaces could be a good way to slice the story into different smaller chunks. You can also look at the data. You can also look at the business rules, and that could be a good demarcation as to where we want to slice the story. So again, Spider can help in getting those additional vantage points on this user story so that the team can comfortably slice it into smaller chunks and still deliver value with each of those slices. The other aspect that we want the team to consider is that when they slice the story slice should be a vertical slice. It should be a slice that they have come up based on the functionality, not based on the technology stack, not based on what technology they are working on. So, example of a horizontal slice would be that they are writing the stories saying, okay, we will work on the front end first. That's the first story. Then we will work on the back end. That's the second story, and so on and so forth. So those are examples of horizontal slicing. And we don't want that because horizontal slices don't deliver any value to our customer. Instead, we want to look at it from the functionality point of view and identify vertical slices, meaning each slice has all these different layers of that cake that we are talking about. But again, focus is not on the technology stack. Focus is on the vertical slice. Focus is on us building a thin slice of that functionality and delivering it to the customer. This is a classic example I use to explain what vertical slicing means. So let's say, for example, we want to build a functionality where we can accept credit cards in our product, right? We want to allow the customer to make payments using credit card. So that's the functionality that Ms. Fab is looking for from us. Now that's a big story. That's a large story. So how do we slice it? So we are talking about it, we discuss it, and we identify that, hey, 3 slices of this could be that we focus on the US market, then we will focus on the Europe market, and then we focus on the Asian market, because each market has different needs, different logistical requirements, and things like that. So we will focus on functionality related to just the US market first. Now within that also, we can say, hey, we can slice it even further, and let's say we identify 3 further slices that, hey, instead of focusing all the credit cards, we will focus on the MasterCard first. So the functionality that delivers MasterCard functionality in the US market first. This is a good example of that vertical slicing. Again, idea is slice it. Number 1, it should be vertical slice, and then we are asking the team again, okay, now you identified 3 slices of this main story, let's estimate them, and if they are coming out with large estimate on that also, then we'll ask them to stay on it and slice it further and further. Eventually they will identify small slices that are either small or medium estimates, and then we ask them to move on to the next story. So when do we stop this iterative cycle for this particular story? Right? One is that we have reached a point where we have identified the stories which are coming out with small or medium estimate. And second, the story meets the definition of ready. This is the definition that the team would have come up with earlier. So we are just keeping it on our radar. We are just keeping it in our peripheral vision and checking our story against the definition of ready. If the definition of ready criteria are met, then the team can say, okay, this is a good story. This is at a stage where we can mark it as ready for us to take it into the future sprint. Now remember, initially Ms. Fab prioritized the story and brought that raw story into this session. Through all this conversation and collaboration between the team and the product owner, as well as other conversations among the team members, we have brought this raw story all the way to it being a ready story. So, the backlog refinement is nothing but the art of getting a raw story to a ready state. Ready story. So this is essentially stepping through each of those steps in detail. This is how I would like the backlog refinement to happen in my team. This is how I coach my team to carry out this backlog refinement. This will make the backlog refinement much more productive for. Hope you are having fun. So far, we did 2 sessions on backlog refinement. In part 1, we did a quick flyby, and in this part 2 video, we just completed a deep dive into the backlog refinement. Is that enough for backlog refinement? I would say no. Join me in part 3 of this series as we look at some of the supporting cast, the artifacts that can help make your backlog refinement much more impactful, effective, and productive.